If you're a busy clean energy professional like me working in sub-Saharan Africa, then you would know how difficult it is to get news about our industry. You're probably following a lot of blogs and LinkedIn pages just to get up-to-date news. Well, we have a solution for that now. We're launching a newsletter called Clean Energy Africa that will deliver news about the clean energy sector in sub-Saharan Africa directly to your inbox 2 times a month. If you would like to subscribe to get up-to-date news and stay on top of everything happening in the industry, then check out the link on the top of our show notes to sign up to our newsletter. Now to the episode. Hello and welcome to the Energy Talk podcast. My name is Olubunmi Olajide. On this podcast, we tell the story of sub-Saharan Africa's energy transition, focusing first on the financiers, policymakers, and operators that are driving us towards a sustainable energy future. If you've listened to any other episodes, then you would know that I love speaking with startup founders. And this episode is going to be a special treat because we get to speak with a CEO, Chidalu of Earthbond, which is still at the pre-seed stage of its development. Earthbond is trying to unlock a very important challenge on financing clean energy assets for small and medium-sized businesses in Nigeria. And they've just raised some funds for their pre-seed stage, and they are currently hiring for a few roles. So head on over to the website of Earthbond. I will have the information in the show notes of this episode if you'd like to look at the available roles. And on this episode, we'll be hearing from Chidalu about why she started this company, what the mission is, and of course, we'll start up with how she first got started in the clean energy space.
So I always kind of had the, idea from my parents. So my parents moved to the US in the 80s. And even though my dad was a doctor, he always had this entrepreneurial, spirit. So he was always working on different ventures, either in his village, in the city he grew up in, just constantly coming back to Lagos. They raised us to always be like, if someone asks you from, say, Nigeria, it doesn't matter what, that you're spending all this time, you grew up in New Jersey, all of this. So I've always felt like my parents were very much connected, both from not just culturally, but economically invested in Nigeria. So growing up, my siblings and I, we traveled back quite often. I think at least for the past 10 years, it's been at least twice a year. And obviously, when I was younger, school and stuff got in the way, but still, I felt quite connected. Lagos is new, right? I think my dad did some schooling in Lagos, so he was cool in his 20s and doing that. But my family's from the East. So my mom grew up in Enugu, so I spent a lot of time there, had family in Abuja, family in Abia State. So it was coming to Lagos to start this business is probably the new part of it, and Lagos is its own creation. So yeah.
I'm sure you have Lagos stories from your time in Lagos so far, but I want to focus on the founding story of Earthbond. So I think the typical path for most people who have a career like yours and go on to a great MBA program is to perhaps pivot to a better opportunity career-wise. But did the urge to start a company come from your upbringing? Like you said, your dad being very entrepreneurial as well. Or did you have some other conviction that kind of drew you, especially to the business segment that Earthbond is in?
Yeah. So I was a politics major in undergrad, and my whole thesis was really focused on, okay, how does entrepreneurship and not Silicon Valley entrepreneurship, but small business, medium business creation, hiring, all of this, how does that intersect with political stability? And I did all this research and blah, blah, blah. And my main kind of takeaway for myself and the career I wanted to do was don't go into politics, go into tech, because if the correlation was positive, but it was the biggest thing that helps small business owners isn't necessarily policy, but it's making business easier, right? Enabling them to literally get paid, pay, employ, hire, blah, blah, blah. And I felt at that point, a lot of work was being done in tech to help small businesses, right? At the end of the day, Google, biggest business is focused on SMEs. And so from there was worked in product management, worked in global sales and all of this. The last product I worked on kind of before business school was focused on small business lending. And it was this product that really helped open my eyes into, okay, you don't necessarily need to have the most technologically elegant or like future looking product in order to like make real impact and hit real business metrics. And
Mm.
so by the time I went into business school, I wasn't necessarily like, oh, I need to start a company. Ideally, I was like, eventually, maybe in 10 years' time, but I knew I wanted to be in an early stage business, focus on Nigerian SMEs and how do you make it easier for them to access financing. One thing led to another in terms of why isn't there financing? What have, whether it's consumer or SME financing companies been able to do across the continent? What industries are they invested in? What problems are they solving? And it came down to really looking at what is the biggest thing people or businesses are spending money on. And here in Nigeria, it's energy, right? And it's such a big pain point. And then you start looking at, okay, the financing models and how that ties to what it's financing, right? If I try and finance a generator, doesn't matter how cheap I make that generator, as the price of diesel goes up, as the price of petrol goes up, you're going to fall into the same challenges, right? So you need to find an asset that you can finance where the cost is stable over time, right? And then you can almost like track, the repayments on that in a way that is, economically sound, right? Or financially sound. And so solar or renewables it really gives you that option where that upfront payment can now be spread out over time. You're not worried about new forms of volatility affecting that repayment rate. And yeah, and so Earthbond was born as this idea after graduation back to Lagos. But even throughout school, the thought was, let me do a lot of the market research, talk to solar providers, talk to banks, talk to BOI, whoever that was focused on this space and figure out how are we going to make this successful. By the time I
Mm.
graduated, we back, hired our first employee, and then kind of started doing pilots. And now it's, I guess, more than a year later, we're not a full team, but we're a bigger team. We have a slightly active social media presence and all of this. So like we are well on our way. And I think what we've been able to do with our initial batch of customers has been a testament to the feasibility of this, and we've raised, and now we're just trying to grow.
That is really amazing to hear. And I always value the opportunity to speak with early stage startups like yourselves, because this is where a lot of things probably aren't fully formed. And one of the things I'm very curious about is, did you get a lot of encouragement early on? Was it like you told everybody about your idea, like, oh yeah, go for it. This is like a fantastic time to move back to Nigeria and start a business. Was it all positive?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I think the funniest thing is, there's a lot of Nigerians at HBS. That's where I
Mm.
did my MBA. A lot of Nigerians that are more Nigerian than me. So like people that are coming from the continent, or like, you have your London cohort of people that like the flights are cheaper. So that they're coming back more often, and they're like, going back. That's, I think I don't, I think I was the only person to come back to Nigeria. Not to say other classes didn't. There's other classes of founders here that are from HBS and whatnot, but a lot of people were questioning, right now, is this the time, blah, blah, blah. But I think for me, right, to be honest, like, I loved my job before business school. I loved being a product manager. I loved working in tech. I understood it. I thought I had a relatively successful career. I liked getting a paycheck from someone else. And so I had I'd learned what I needed to learn from, whether it was the big tech companies, the US startup scene, et cetera. I knew the next big challenge I wanted to do was on the continent.
Mm.
And so it wasn't really like, for me, the opportunity cost was really just like this monetary figure. But it's kind of like, I had this conversation way early in my career. It's like you're building your early stage of your career, you might be building, your safety net. But if you're never like going to take that leap, you just wasted your time building that safety nets, right?
Mhm.
You're
Yeah.
never going to use it. You might as well just stay on the safe course anyways and kind of chill and whatever. But for me, it was like, all right, we've done the things, we've gotten the blue checks, we've worked hard. We've learned from every place we could. We've taken advantage of the privileges and the things we've been able to access. Now it's time to execute on that and think about, why did you do all of this? So for me, it was just kind of like a no-brainer that I was going to do something uncomfortable after graduation in order to kind of reach this higher goal that is risky, but is worth the journey, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And let's get into the post moving back stage of Earthbond. I think first let's start with the elevator pitch. So, what is Earthbond for the audience, and what is the problem mission that you're trying to solve?
Sure, sure. So Earthbond is a digital one-stop shop for small and medium businesses that want to transition from diesel and petrol generators to solar. Essentially, our platform, removes the complexity by understanding a customer's current energy habits and their financial standing, recommending a solar installation that can lower that generator reliance and those costs, pre-qualifying them for financing that can break down that upfront solar cost into monthly chunks, and then establishing a carbon baseline that can serve as discounts or rebates even, right, denominated in USD from that reduced carbon emissions from transitioning to a cleaner source.
Mm,
Today, businesses have trouble finding what are good products, who's a good installer, what is maintenance going to cost, or am I going to need to replace this in 2 years? Businesses have trouble accessing banks, right? That's starting to change, but a lot of banks touts clean energy, this, that, but there's no office that they can easily access, button they can click to apply or whatever. And then the carbon credit space is filled with a lot of opacity, and it's hard to access. Okay, who is actually buying, who's selling, what is the quality of these credits, where are they from, how are they helping, what is it actually unlocking, additionality, all of that. So really the goal is to reduce all this complexity to the benefit of African small business owners that just need to run their business without energy being this huge pain.
hmm, yeah. And I think one notable milestone is Earthbond has raised a pre-seed, I believe. And although the full information is in public blue, but we do know that it's at least above 250K. So congratulations on that. And I'm thinking, now that you've crossed that initial milestone, the next stage is building your team, which you mentioned that you already have your first set of hires. I understand that you're increasing now. What other milestones are you looking at after the pre-seed fundraise?
Yeah. So after this pre-seed to right, raising the team, number one. So looking for great, smart, amazing people who are kind of committed to this challenge and this mission, that bring great expertise of working with small, medium business owner or working in the solar space here, and helping us execute. The next major piece is this carbon discount. So we have a very straightforward way of calculating our carbon baselines for each individual customer. And now acquiring our first contracts in terms of selling those or pre-selling really those carbon credits is key, right? To unlocking discounts, to unlocking rebates. When we talk to business owners, they're quite interested in this. Like, I've heard of carbon credits, but is this like a crypto scam? Is this this? Is this really going to help? Is this, and these are fair questions, right? These are not dumb questions. And you want to be able to build a trusted, verifiable pipeline of carbon credits for buyers that are external to Nigeria, right? To really get this whole system to work, we need to essentially seek out what is almost like a private or market-based mechanism that is separate from, the subsidies that typically industries are reliant on. Because as we've seen, you can't always depend on those to grow, right?
Mm,
So that's our big milestone. A lot of the work we're doing is following the gold standard methodology, which gives us a lot of breadth in terms of who our buyers are and a lot of credibility, and allows us to achieve a higher premium. But we've also worked with rec buyers already that are in the market looking to aggregate. And recs are a little different from carbon credits. Carbon credits focus on your carbon emission and your carbon footprint, and how whatever activity you are doing is going to either reduce future emissions or literally remove carbon from the air. So you hear about things like DAC or CDR technologies, et cetera. But on the other side, RECs, which is renewable energy credits, those focus on the amount of renewable energy capacity you are implementing. And companies will essentially buy those, especially if they are, maybe increasing or using, non-renewable technologies. How can they essentially offset that cost by enabling someone else to now adopt renewable energy? Two different methodologies. The main benefit to the Nigerian
Mm.
market is offering some level of financial incentive or financial enablement, right, for them to now adopt solar at a more affordable price.
This is Olu, host of the podcast, interrupting this episode to let you know that we're looking for sponsors to support our work covering the sustainable energy transition in sub-Saharan Africa. In the 5 years since starting this project, we've grown the platform to a top 10% ranked podcast globally, and we're looking to go even further. If your organization or fund would like to learn more about reaching thousands of engaged listeners monthly, then reach out to us with the email in the show notes of this episode. And for our listeners, you can continue to support us for free by sharing this episode with the people in your network, leaving a review in your favorite listening platform, and signing up to the newsletter linked in the show notes of this episode. Now, back to the conversation. So one of the biggest challenges, this is both sides, a perceived risk and a valid concern most times, is how difficult it is to validate data about the Nigerian market specifically. I imagine dealing in the small medium businesses segment, you are seeing that firsthand. Has this been something that you've been able to hurdle across, or is it more perceived than actual risk at this point for you?
Yeah. We've been very, I think, in this first year, right, as we target different financing partners, it's been very, very key to have like a 0% default rates, right? And make sure
Mm-hmm.
that everyone we work with, we are, doing all of the digital due diligence, capturing all the information, verifying physically and digitally who this person is, and that this will not lead into fraud. But obviously, when you think about scaling, that becomes more difficult. We've had to put customers on pause because, they didn't have their TIN validated by that specific office. And it's actually like the office that's leading to challenges for them getting. So from a data and from a verification perspective, there's a lot that you can do, but there's still a lot of edge cases that do create hurdles in terms of thinking about how we scale. And we're constantly working around that. And that really means like having redundancies of how we validate a customer, right? There's not just one simple way. They're like, okay, check all these boxes and then we're done. It's like, check this box. If you can't check that box, check this box. We can't check that box, check this box. So it's like, and that's really how we're building out our platform, our pre-qualification platform today. I think the other piece that Nigeria is a bit different from other countries or markets is while our banking system has its challenges, it is quite advanced when it comes to what we are able to do and what we are able to capture. There's competing things going on and there are challenges, right? I'm not going to say it's like the Eurozone in terms of what you're able to do in terms of payments, but the reality is like the push from regulation to have NINs and BVNs makes offering loans and credit and due diligence a lot easier. For us, that tied to CAC, which is the business commission here, like those documents tied to BVN, like all of that makes it a lot easier to have a business digital identity for us to now verify against. The other part of data comes into collecting data on usage and basically IoT data for us. And in other markets, people have been able to, look at where they should expand with solar based off of the grid. Now, we don't have clear grid data, right? We don't have access to clear grid data straight from the government, or straight from the discos. And so a lot of what we have to do there is identify from a lot of different sources and map out, okay, what does it look like? Where are the band A areas? Where are the band B areas? Of those band B areas, which ones are actually reaching their SLAs, which ones are not. And so a lot of that data is not as clean, is not as clear, is not beautifully mapped up and served on a silver platter. And so a lot of the work that we do from a go-to-market perspective is kind of on the ground, is word of mouth, is understanding, is going and doing the surveys and understanding, okay, which locales, which industries, which shops, which types of businesses are really needing to make this switch and which ones are okay, and which ones are still eager to make the switch, but for other reasons.
Mm. And I think that there are a few other factors that are driving this because there's the macro factors that are driving demand. So for listeners, I'm not sure if all everybody will be familiar. Nigeria has been going through it's fair to describe as a tough time economically. The price of diesel and petrol has gone up, I think, at least 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years. Things have gotten a lot more expensive. And you made reference to the band A or band B of the grid. So band A customers had their tariff increased by about like 3x earlier this year. So electricity has become a quite substantial line item in people's bills. At least for me, it's gone from mostly negligible to like, okay, I'm actually noticing how much I'm spending right now
Yeah.
on energy. And that is part of the reason why people are looking to switch, other than the fact that the infrastructure is not really there in Nigeria. And most people already do not get served by the grid to an adequate amount, especially for businesses where that actually matters a lot. They typically need the power throughout business hours. And if they have systems that run passively, they need power basically all the time. So I imagine that is driving demand. But in terms of how the market is responding to your products, is that demand reflecting in the amount of inbounds you're getting? Is it that you're just getting way more requests than you can accommodate, or what's the market reception right now?
Yes, way more requests. But I will also say it's a challenge, right? Because we focus on businesses, right? For many reasons, but it's really because um, we're pretty nerdy and it's about building a business case, right? We want someone to
Mm,
switch to solar because we know we can save them money, because we know there is some economic benefit. And what we get is a lot of businesses, but we also get a lot of residential customers, right? That are coming in interested. They're like, okay, my home bill went up. My facility manager is not doing a good job of figuring out, okay, I'm using less than my neighbor, but we're getting charged the same. We're using too much diesel. Or the facility manager is turning it off from, 9 to 5, but I work from home. So now I don't have power. So there's all these different cases that expand beyond just I run a business, energy is an input into that business. And so I need a cheaper form of energy. And so for
mm,
us, when we see these other types of customers, we're in the process of crafting, okay, how do we adequately serve this pent up demand, or how do we direct them to someone who is better served for them? And how do we help them analyze what is the best way for them to save money on energy, right? For households, if you're not working from home, then a lot of your energy usage is going to be at night, which means batteries are going to be the biggest drain on your energy kind of configuration, right?
mm,
And that's expensive, and that might be more expensive than relying on your generator in some cases. And so it's about helping them understand, okay, what is the best use of energy? Is there a behavioral change that also needs to happen? Or can we just plug it in an inverter and batteries, at least get your lights and fridge working throughout the night, and then you're good. So that's been something that we've been looking at and trying to figure out, how do we serve that customer easily, even just from an educational standpoint, so that they can move forward and be okay and have a solution that they can go forward and implement.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned building a business case. Assuming this is more towards the financiers, because you would obviously need to raise some sort of facilities. So I know you can't get too much in detail with this, but early stage compared to now. So early stage being like the first like 3 months when you start having conversations to now, when you have some data to show. Has the conversation changed significantly? Are you looking at sources within Nigeria, outside Nigeria, and where overall is the traction coming from in that direction?
Yeah. And you're talking about sources of funding and financing, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we were looking just within Nigeria, and to some extent we still are. We're always heavy on that, looking at basically fo- sources of financing that are already used to financing small and medium businesses, right? So
Mm,
that could be commercial banks, fintechs, et cetera, that we partner with to offer that financing. Now, as we expand, we're looking at financiers that want to look at aggregate. or aggregated projects or thinking about project financing and thinking about these bigger ticket pieces. Now, the challenge is always going to be FX because, as you said, Nigeria is having a hard time and the currency is having a harder time.
Mm,
So, coming from a market where, the default, the let me say the federal funds rate or the interest rate given by your central bank
mm,
in the US is in the single digits, right?
yeah.
Here in Nigeria, it's currently around 27%, sorry. 27%, right? So when you tell someone that your interest rate is 5% in your currency, that is a challenging conversation, regardless, right? Even if you are, you've done all the math and you understand that macroeconomics, whatever, that means that in the next year, you're paying 36% more for this product in your currency. Of course, you understand that what you can buy today with 1 million naira will not be what you could buy next year with 1 million naira.
Mm,
But it's still a harder pill to swallow. So the conversation today is really around, okay, what mix of local currency financing and at what interest rates can we gather that now to pass on to the customer?
mm,
Because looking outside or looking at USD denominated debt is always a challenge with small and medium businesses that their revenue is coming in naira. If their revenue is denominated, in USD, then they can hedge this a bit, right? They can increase their prices it works or
mm,
can work. We say that. But when you're dealing with like businesses at in mass here in Nigeria, like they are dealing with this currency. So you need to think about debt in this currency and think about interest rates in this currency, even if your products are imported or paid for in USD. So I think that's the biggest shift in conversation on how do we now aggregate these larger pools and take that into account. Obviously, blended finance is always like the conclusion, but our thing is, okay, but what blend? How do you what percentage makes that feasible, right? And you have a lot of financing available for like these short term 12-month, 24 months, maybe 24 months even, but mostly like 12 months, right? And it'll be
mm,
at 5%, 7% per month. And the challenge there is just if what I'm trying to do is make it easier for you to switch to solar, that monthly cost of solar, that monthly repayment needs to be equal or less than the amount that you're paying for diesel or petrol.
yeah.
If it's not, then it becomes an investment conversation, which is fair, but it's a harder conversation than
Mm,
just like, okay, buy this, everything stays the same, and you'll save, right? At least in a year, if not immediately.
yeah. Mm. And I guess this is where we can go back to the renewable energy credits and see where this comes in, because REX in particular, if you're looking at just an individual business that has like, let's say 3 kilowatts of PV capacity on the roofs, it's probably not a very tangible amount. But if you're aggregating that over like a portfolio of loans and you're able to get up to like 1,000 kilowatts or more, then it becomes a lot more reasonable to go and try to sell those RECs off to whatever off-taker is available.
Mhm,
Has that proven viable at this stage? Because I know that the REC market is a bit of a wild west, and especially when you're doing the REC market and your projects are being done in the African continent and in Nigeria.
exactly. Exactly. And that's our challenge with Rex, right? There's a constraint around Rex where you need, okay. Our take is the best kind of like rec or credit, carbon credit or just environmental credit buyers are going to be from countries where there's higher regulation and higher interest in buying products from someone who cares
Mm.
about the environment.
Yeah.
Nigeria, Africa doesn't emit enough for it to be a major challenge. We have our NDCs and that's good. But the reality is like less than 4%, right, of global emissions are coming from the continent.
Yeah.
So your biggest buyers or your most pressing buyers are going to be from outside the continent. Now, with Rex, there's typically the stipulation that I'm implementing renewable energy in the same country where I am, what is it called? Where I am using non-renewables, right? So using some carbon emitting or heavily carbon emitting energy, like a generator, right? Or
Mm.
maybe a dirty grid. And so the number of companies, so the companies that can be your buyers are international companies that are operating in Nigeria, right? And so that's kind of your market for Nigerian RECs. And so that limits you, right? Versus when you look at the voluntary carbon markets and you can essentially look beyond and look at companies that maybe don't even operate in Nigeria and companies that do emit and do want to change and do want to balance out their books, right? This can help. And then you have a broader, larger market. So that's how we've seen it. We've worked essentially with aggregators to add in our projects. And we look at also aggregating across this market, both with projects that we've directly implemented, but also with installers that they themselves are not going to spend the 10, 20, 30, 100K to get accredited, but want to tap into this for themselves or for their customers. And
Mm,
that's really how we see it as the next step, as the next steps in the next play. Just like everything, it's a sales play. You have to find good buyers. You have to find good buyers at a good price. You have to make sure you're offering a good and kind of like data driven product where you're able to say like these credits are tied to this project here. It's not double counted. It has some societal impact. And we can show you literally how much is being generated by this system. And that's really like how we think about it.
So would you describe it more as to have more liquid carbon markets in general as a nice to have or a key lever to
Love it.
unlock growth?
I think I think that's tough. I think having more liquid carbon market is key, but I don't think it's a blocker yet.
Mm,
Not yet,
yes.
right? I think as Nigeria's energy consumption grows, yes, this will be a blocker. But I think today we have so much to grow into that even what's available today, it's about finding the buyers. It's about understanding what the key factors are for them into buying your credits versus another company's or versus a DAC or whatever. But yeah.
Mm, okay. Okay. And now I'm curious, kind of like a walkthrough to what the general onboarding process is for a company that is a small business that's coming to you in order to finance your solar system. So typically when they come, what's the average the system price, the total value that they're coming in of equipment that they want to purchase? What does that mean in terms of down payment, in terms of how long they have to repay? And if you can get into interest, that's also great. But just to paint a picture of what that onboarding is like for small businesses coming to Earthbond.
Yeah. So the key systems that we get most interest in are the 5 kVA and the 10 kVA. But we do everything from 3.5 all the way to 20 kVA, kind of like out of the box. And then we do custom systems about that size, right? So you'll get a factory that wants, 60 kVA or 100 kVA, whatever. But you come to us, essentially, we look at your current energy spend. We understand, all right, what size generators do you have? We might implement essentially like a data logger, which is just a monitor that will track over the next week or 2 weeks, right? What are the spikes in energy? What is your actual consumption? We'll do a download of, okay, what are you spending on it, right? You buy diesel or petrol every day, every other day, once a month, you're trekking in diesel, whatever it is.
Mm,
And then we'll understand, okay, this is your spend and this is your energy consumption. Based off of that, this is a solar installation that could either replace that or severely reduce your generator consumption. Based off of that, we'll essentially give you an invoice. So like, let's say you want a 5 kV system, that's around 5 million naira. That'll include a lithium ion battery, hybrid inverter, panels that actually charge the battery and your business. And some of the challenges we get are a lot of people want to tweak that to lower the cost. Now, we love lowering costs, right? We're all about that. But the challenge is we don't want you sacrificing a lithium ion battery that will last you 5 years or more for, a lead acid battery that's going to get you 2 years and then stop working or severely lower its shelf life.
mm,
Or, thinking about like, all right, well, I just want, 2 panels, but you're basically off grid and you're not really getting enough grid power. So you don't have enough solar energy to charge your batteries and run your business. And so we really think about like, what is the design we're giving you and will this sustain your operations, right? Or is this going to just end up being an investment that doesn't really end up paying off because you haven't really offset the major energy costs that you have? So there's probably an ideal stage, and those are the packages that we already have. So if you go to our site, you can see what those packages are. When we say 5 kVA, like this will actually give you 5 kVA over, the course of the day and going into the night with the batteries. From there, we'll offer options, right? If we've been talking to you already in terms of your spend, we've already asked you about your revenue. We've already asked you about like, are you registered with the CAC? Do you have those documents in place, et cetera? And at that point, it's really about, here are your options for financing. You could go with us, you could go with one of our financing partners, and here are the different rates. So today, your down payment could be anywhere from 10 to 30%, or you could do 90%. We're happy with that, but as little as 10%. And repayment is anywhere from 6 months, though we've had people pay off in as little as 3 months, but anywhere from 6 months to 36 months. And so that really gives customers kind of like the options that are available to them. We'll always essentially bring one to the top, which will usually be the longest term at the lowest interest rate. So like, here's how we get you to the lowest monthly payment in comparison. Because a lot of businesses are trying to make it through the year, right?
Mm.
They're trying to say like, all right, great, it would be great to invest in this and realize this payback period in 3 years. But like, what I really need is to be able to survive into the next year. And hopefully, as this tumultuous period comes to a close, be in a better
Yeah.
place. And then maybe I could pay it off in a year or whatever. But I think that's the challenge sometimes. It's hard, right? It's expensive to have a long-term vision, especially in this market. So you need to give people essentially what is actually best for them and helpful to get them to where they need to be. We talk to
Mm.
a lot of like pharmacies, for instance, and they're very understanding of credit and it's not really a conversation on like interest or whatever. They get it. A lot of their inventory is working capital. But for
Mm.
them, they want to take out a loan for working capital or for inventory. And they only want to take on this financing if it's going to lower the cost of something else. In our case, we're competing against the cost of their monthly cost of a generator, on diesel or petrol. And so it
Mm.
becomes really easy for us. We look at that cost, we figure out which plan is going to get us under, and that's what we present. And then we give them the other options. Once they say yes, we finish that KYC process. They pay their deposit and we install. And then everything related to maintenance we cover, cleanings we cover, any kind of warranty fulfillment that needs to happen if something happens with equipment or anything like that, we cover. Today, we've been really lucky that we've had really, really, really low issues or issue incidents. We have cleanings at places that are particularly dusty, which has been very interesting to understand and see that. And yeah, so it's been good. We've essentially just said we're going to adhere to tier 1 products, which allow us to reduce our cost of maintenance and make sure that customer is happy. And then because we have remote monitoring, we're able to see things even for the customer. We're able to even address things like, okay, press reset on this because maybe lightning struck or something last night. So things like that are
Mm.
where we, I think, lower our costs for ourselves and then the cost of ownership for that end customer over time.
That is very useful. Thanks so much for that walkthrough. And as we get to the end of this conversation, one thing I'm very curious to explore is the role of partnerships, especially you've mentioned quite a few stakeholders. So you mentioned commercial lenders, you mentioned installers, obviously the customers that you're serving. How has it been managing those partnership relationships, especially the ones that are core to business operations and the ones that are more strategic, like the lenders, the stakeholders in the carbon markets, or anybody that's enabling that side of the conversation? Was it a challenge initially, or has it been kind of like a very receptive environment where everybody's very eager to work together and push it forward?
There is eagerness definitely to see this through. I think when you talk to anyone about energy in this country, everyone knows something must be done. So I do think we got a lot of eagerness to like, something has to happen here. Is there? And for us, we're really, because we do seek out our own customers, right? benefit is we're essentially cheap customer acquisition for every one of our partners, whether it's banks, fintechs, solar installers. Like we are finding them customers that can afford either their loan or can afford their product or installation services, right? So in a lot of ways, our partners have been eager to tap into that and tap into this as an opportunity. And as we spin up, like now we're looking for partners to work with us to build up our base of carbon offsets, right? So always thinking about it from my perspective, it's always like, okay, the what can I give a partner? How can we benefit this market? How can we improve this ecosystem? Has been a way that has made it much easier to work with partners and manage partners. I do think some of the reason that we're hiring now and what we're looking for is better management of that, right? Going from a team of, you know, two at the beginning of last year to where we are now, it's like every single person now is connected internally, but also knows a partner, right? Is almost like
Mm,
responsible for like, okay, whether it's our installers or our suppliers or our banks and lenders, whether it's our co-sponsors and thinking about affiliates and referrals, like so all of this continues to be like an ecosystem play and partners are really integral to that. So how we manage partners is kind of our not our value prop, but it is kind of key to us being successful in this market and making sure that we are collaborating and instead of competing is very important to us and making sure we're being helpful.
mhm. And on the back of that, you've established very nicely the market, the opportunity that Earthbond is seeing. We told you this question in advance so you could prepare. But with everything you've said and with the mission that's ahead of you, with the growth that you and your team are looking to undertake, how do you define failure in the work that Earthbond is doing?
Yeah. How do I define failure? I think failure is in some ways kind of part of the process. I do expect our company to iterate on this core idea of like, how do we help small and medium businesses uh, uh, get access to clean energy, right? So I think we will learn things about like, don't use this type of financing, use this. We will learn things about using certain products or where we do need to cut costs, right? And where do we sacrifice quality for costs and where do we not? So I think failure is integral to building a resounding business and building real value in the market, especially being a new entrant. I don't
Mm,
think we know everything, but I think if it's like, really to answer your question in a not poetic way and just be like, here's how we fail. I think it's if we kind of give up, right? If we don't make way for other businesses to thrive in this market, if we don't make it cheaper, right? We could close, right, you know, $1 million contracts over the next 5 years and like be a $20 million company for top tier, foreign owned bodies in the market. But that doesn't make the price of those goods cheaper for Nigerian businesses or downstream off takers. It doesn't really help the local economy in any way. It doesn't really help local suppliers or just creates like now there's a whole set of business that doesn't really add back into the market. I think that's how we fail, right? If we make absolutely no impact on this market and into our original vision, and if we even leave it worse off because of what we've enabled. So I think we're quite careful into the standard that we're setting, the path that we are forging, and kind of like the footprint we leave behind.
Thank you for listening to the episode. I'll definitely be adding Earthbond to the long list of startups that I'm cheering on in the clean energy space on the African continent. And if you did enjoy this episode, please make sure that you're subscribed wherever you're listening. And also share with a friend, colleague, or whoever you think might find this useful as well. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye bye now.